Morphogenesis and where we are today. Our vision has always been centered around the notion of the Indian perspective, and the work that we've pursued has been to take that Indian perspective, a tradition of over 1,000 years or more of glorious architecture in this part of the world, and then apply it to the global condition, the global context. And as we all know today, that the global condition, the global context is in a high state of stress. So when I was thinking about what to speak about today, I sort of ventured back and I looked at last year, and this is in Mumbai. It's the same, a similar keynote that I was giving in at the FOAID Festival of Architecture. And it all seems very alien now. A lot of people in the audience, that interaction, I knew who I was talking to, we were communicating, and it's all changed. However, while I was looking at this presentation last year, some things came to mind. And the theme of FOAID last year was Make It Matter, as opposed to this year, which is Live the Change. And for Make It Matter, we've chosen a set of projects and some of working philosophies. And we postulated that is it possible to live towards a net zero future, which is net zero on energy, net zero on water, a net zero on waste to landfill. And in that sense, could we do a lot more with a lot less? And we built it on the 4 pillars of sustainability, optimization, uniqueness, and livability. I'll talk about that a little bit more before I come to today. This was from last year, late last year. This was just sort of pre-COVID, if I may. Everyone keeps talking about post-COVID times, but one should not forget that the pre-COVID times were already under a high level of stress. And if we take any Indian city, and I'm going to keep my context today here to Indian cities, we were already in a state of environmental emergency. COVID was in some senses, a nail in the coffin. And we as architects, I think, were really trying to improve that urban Indian condition of improving Indian cities. And what we had studied was a sort of bust of construction activity, and more so particularly in the commercial space, where our cities started looking all very similar. These are not my buildings, but that's not really the key issue. The key issue is that we started seeing the Indian city as a city of nowhere. I mean, any of these buildings could be anywhere, and we, with our key interest in the past, we could sort of place a building, and we could place it because buildings were being built to limited resources. They were naturally cooled, virtually no air conditioning, adequate daylighting, water conservation, waste reduction, all the things that we strive for today and what nature excels at was available. All that knowledge, all that wisdom, all that design capability sits all around us, and it's in some senses available today. And we encapsulated that into this pyramid. What we said was our strength. Our strength is Indian architects, and a key strength being passive design. And and not really because we set out to save the world for environmental crisis, but simply because that's what we're really good at, and that's what we know how to design and work with very, very limited resources. And the sort of pyramid that we still follow to date relies on the fact that we create a microclimate naturally. You step into any piece of vernacular architecture and you will feel that reduction in temperature. You then optimize the building design where you reduce its energy consumption. And once you've taken out all, you've taken the sort of requirements of that building to be artificially lit, to be mechanically ventilated or air conditioned, where you optimize water consumption, and that's when you start sort of looking at the at technology with the aim of reaching the ultimate objective of being resilient and being net zero. And at that time, late last year, we encapsulated it into a philosophy, which we worked with the 4 pillars of morphogenesis, which we call sustainable, and our objective was to consume 50 to 75% lesser energy through passive design, and not through mechanical means. Second was optimization, and our objective here was to reduce consumption, reduce overbuildability, but do it through design innovation. Uniqueness. Projects must be contextual. They must respond to the climate, the context, and yet be globally pertinent. And of course, last but not the least, livable. Building smart environments, building for the user, not for the client. The client may or may not be the user, but essentially, how do you begin to put yourself in the shoes of the user who's actually going to use that space? And with these 4 parameters, over the years till now, and then I'll come to our post-pandemic condition, we've successfully managed to reduce from green building standards 70% reduction in energy consumption by pretty much deploying what we already knew, but except using computational strategies to be able to simulate and emulate high-performing vernacular buildings. In optimization, we laid down very strong performance criteria. We said we'll keep the cost of the project the same, because we don't believe that in this part of the world, a high-performing green building should cost more. If anything else, it should cost less. And with these metrics, all our projects began to follow suit. Now, if you notice, a lot of these metrics are physical. They're based around energy, daylighting, facade performance, overbuildability, structural optimization, MEP. And by and large, we discovered that you could take half of what we were really using and knock it out. We mapped a lot of other human factors of travel time, and this is all pre-COVID. And a lot of our projects were performing to these standards. And I will come very soon to why I mentioned this in terms of optimization. Of course, uniqueness I've spoken about. I won't take too much time here, but the idea really was that all the projects should respond differently to their typology, to their climate, and livability. Last not the least, incorporation of highly useful outdoor spaces, but made comfortable through microclimate creation, ensuring universal accessibility and design, looking at every single horizontal plane that exists in the building, which is outdoors, and creating outdoor activities in them. Looking at a very strong relationship between the inside and the outside, in infusing art and culture into architecture and making it available to the people in the city. And this was our high focus for the last decade or two of practice in terms of sustainability optimization. So, good passive design, save energy, good optimization, save cost and overbuildability. Focus on the uniqueness, the local crafts of the area, and make sure people are comfortable and your buildings are highly livable. And 4 projects that I'd shown last year, which some are complete, some are ongoing, and we looked at them again. Now, Maker Maxcity is a very famous complex in Mumbai, and to date, it has the highest rental yield in India, if not in most part of South Asia and the Middle East. And that's simply because we focused a lot on those metrics that I'd mentioned to you, and it's become a favorite of people to come and work here. The Surat Diamond Bourse, which continues its construction through this time and is approaching completion by next year, which is, as per our daily, said to be the largest office building in the world at about 70 lakh square feet as a single building. And even here, using those metrics of SOUL, we managed to demonstrate and as these savings that we pledged. And it had, Surat Diamond Bourse today has the largest application of radiant cooling, which allows more than half the building to be passively cooled. This was a third project, Calcutta, and these are sort of reasonably large projects in different climates in different cities, and a very, very strong response to working with the local art schools to sort of ensure these high facades, which are all west facing, create an urban artscape with hand carved stone and craft. So integrating art and culture into the very premise of the buildings, all north-south facing buildings, and the west facades and the east facades as this huge sort of banner. I mean, that length is about nearly half a kilometer with these sort of 100-meter high slices of art and sculpture in the sky or in the skyline. And this one, by the end of last year, went on to win the best commercial building globally at the Cityscape Awards in Dubai. And of course, this campus for Infosys, which has now started construction again, and it was down and it was pledged to be the world's largest net zero energy campus, net zero water, and net zero discharge. But most importantly, I come to fast forward by 6 months, this was end of last year, and make it matter from FOAID. I mean, I saw the theme this time is now lift the change. And we've begun to think that with what has transpired in the last 6 months, the world will survive global warming or global warming. The question really is of humanity. Will humanity survive? And lessons in the fact that when one human being has become a weapon for another, and hence we need social distancing, and our very existence is reason for our very threat. We started thinking now about moving a little bit more towards not only net zero, but more towards performative architecture. And I'll explain that a little bit more through 4 projects that sort of more or less coincided in completion towards in these last 6 to 9 months. Of a few, one odd is a bit older, but it was interesting to see that the philosophy that we had adopted for the last 2 decades, would it hold up to this new condition, this new pandemic condition? Because everything that we had worked towards, I mean, if we were designing tall buildings, we were trying to move people up together in a very high density building, and now we're thinking completely the reverse. So how would these buildings, and what would really be this new form of architecture that we should be thinking about? Because it is an incredible shakeup, and I don't want to use the term opportunity, but yes, this is an opportunity that we can't let go waste. So I'm going to take you through 4 projects which we've completed during this period. What we managed to do also just about pre-COVID, that we became more or less the only architectural firm in the world where that process of SOAP, which sort of picks on traditional vernacular architecture and is contemporized with metrics and applied to the sort of global condition, we managed to get a design copyright on the process itself. It's very rare for a process to be copyrighted, but we were very happy to achieve that. I'm going to start now with our first project. This sort of completed right in the middle of this pandemic. It's up in Rishikesh. It's in the outer Himalayan range in a very difficult and inaccessible location. Difficult not because it's very pretty, but the real problem is of getting material up there. Is the big problem of very, very inconsistent supply of energy. There is a large, not large, but there's a community of people who live and work here and always have. They're not migrant. And what was really interesting is when all the migration was happening in India, but that's how we build our buildings. A whole bunch of people come from one state to another state, live in terrible conditions, and make these phenomenal buildings. And when we were doing this project, we were sort of very clear about a few things. So Forest Essential, I'm sure a lot of you know, is a luxury Ayurveda brand, and all their products are made with the Ayurveda process. And we decided that where the site was located, we'd work with the local community. We'd focus on the fact that we would try and not as much look at the net zero aspect, but can this really survive as off-grid hill architecture, as a prototype for self-sustaining off-grid hill architecture? So not of an electricity grid, not of a water supply pipeline, built entirely from local materials, and all the discharge is sort of recycled within. So the architecture itself embodying the very nuance of how the product, or what they were manufacturing with there. So working with the community, we mapped out in a radius of about 1 kilometer from the site. There are about 150 hutments, about 800 people in this village called Gram Lotsi in Uttarakhand. And that's the sort of site. Like I said, it's a very pretty site, but very inaccessible. And most of the construction in this sort of ranges are done in a very traditional method. Lifestyles are very local, very little sort of material comes in and out of this region due to, of course, transportation issues. And the lifestyle is pretty happy. I mean, people are comfortable there, and even now, highly unaffected by this sort of endemic condition. They foraged for local herbs, and they pretty much consumed what they built. Of course, we did our studies on the climate to see how can we pursue the idea of building this notion of off-grid hill architecture, and further, if it does work, can it contribute to distributed manufacturing where people don't have to leave their villages and come to cities to work in complex and large factories and in bad conditions? But could we sort of really decentralize manufacturing in India by relying on principles from the past, working with the climate, the local ecology, and see if we can set up a completely different form of distributed supply chain system? So I won't take too much time here. Of course, we studied the climate, and we worked out that at least for 80% of the year, through passive strategies, we could make this building, by and large, this manufacturing facility, work off-grid. Of course, the production processes involves making incense sticks, raw material, fragrance. So there are many processes which have very different requirements in terms of humidity requirements, temperature requirements of how the whole sort of product is made. And we then mapped out for each of those spaces exactly what we were really looking at. And in terms of course, sustainability, I've already spoken about. We were very clear that the materials that we would work with would all be local, local stones. In fact, some of the stone is excavated from the site itself, and the employment would be with all the local people. So it would be more a community project that works towards making this Ayurvedic luxury product, which is pretty much sold all over the world. And it's that story really that sort of ties it as a model. So the Indian perspective in that sense within the global context. And the aesthetic would sort of be an emergent quality of that kind of process of really working with the local. And of course, like I said, a lot of community pride, community living, and then the people who build it will work in it. So in terms of how we went about looking at the form optimization, we worked with the slope. We worked the slope out. We had a central courtyard, a south-facing roof where we had our solar panels for generating the energy for most of the production that was going on in the building. The building itself being net zero, and in fact, we eventually ended up being energy positive. And then south-facing, slightly angled, slightly shaded slope to be used as a communal space for outdoor manufacturing and drying of herbs and products. So very, very sort of simple section. If you look at this section, you would probably find examples of very similar sort of methodologies of working of how you capture cool air, hot air rising, daylight penetration, and that's the sort of solar roof, and that's the outdoor working roof. We worked a lot also on the envelope optimization in order to achieve those metrics for it to be off-grid. And we looked at various forms of construction, from single-leaf brick wall to different window-to-wall ratios. And eventually we ended up with a window-to-wall ratio of about 25% with double stone brick cavity walls, and achieving UVAC. It's by and large, we weren't going to use any expensive insulation brought in from the cities or from far away. So just working with the local sort of technique and getting the right U values to be able to get the envelope to be optimized. So these are some of the temperature recordings. So what you see in the blue is the temperature that varies, and that's the sort of inside temperature, sort of maintaining a median of 25, because the high thermal light sort of breaks the peaks and allows that internal space to be comfortable. And similarly with the humidity, with the natural wind flows, whether through stack or wind capture, to again bring the humidity down to a very, very reasonable band of about 40 to 55% of humidity, cutting out the troughs and the peaks. And through a very, very natural and open section to allow for manufacturing, packaging, outdoor drying, office space, to allow for this whole performance to happen with very different criteria, but using passive design.